Ken Coleman hosts the Ken Coleman Show. He's, of course, a great guest here on KCMO. You hear him on the Ramsey Show as well, 3 to 5 in the afternoon on KCMO Talk Radio. Ken, there's a lot of confusion out there. What do you make of what's going on right now?
Well, I think we've figured out now that there's a lot of agendas going into headlines. And it depends on what media outlet you follow. It depends on your personal situation. And I think that's where all of these mixed headlines are coming at us. And I think it's why a lot of people are like, well, if everything is so good, then why is Biden and his approval rating so bad? If everything is so good, why do we see skyrocketing credit card debt? If everything is so good, you could just keep on going. So certainly, listen, I'm always excited when I see that the Fed's going to cut rates instead of to continue to raise them. I think that the Fed responded, I think, in a little bit of a panic, and I've been very critical of Jerome Powell because they flooded the market during the pandemic with a bunch of liquid, and then they're like, we got to get this under control because everybody was spending like a drunken sailor. So there's been a lot of reacting going on. Certainly glad to see them slow down on the rate raises. But let's remember this, Pete, about the stock market. A lot of Americans think good stock market news means that the overall economy is good, and that has really nothing to do with it. That's largely speculation and people that are big-time investors saying, okay, this is where we think these companies are going to be, and this is where we think things are going, so we feel better about putting our chips into the table than we did maybe a couple weeks ago. So we still have a lot to look at. I think it's a very interesting time. One thing that concerns me is we are going to see, at least, this is what the Congressional Budget Office is saying, unemployment begin to tick up a little bit. And we've been at an unprecedented historical low for a while. And you just got to believe that the law averages says that's probably going to come true. So you never like to see that data come out.
That is an excellent point. Now, you're right. What the markets are doing is not what's happening on Main Street, but a lot of people will say, hey, my 401k is doing good. A lot of this is emotional, is mental, and people feel better when they open up their portfolios and they see that big grand number. But how do you square that then with the credit card debt, which is also at record highs, and you just alluded to that, and we're going right into Christmas, New Year's, when people are spending a lot of money, and oftentimes money they don't have.
That's right. Well, that's the problem. It's that we as humans are emotional, and then when you throw in the emotion into spending, you can get yourself in real trouble. So the things that I'm concerned about are the national debt. I'm concerned about the household debt. Very concerned about those things because that's when you begin to see a real squeeze. Let's just see what happens in 2024 when those student loan payments start to become regular. I mean, even the Biden administration said, all right, you got to pay them, but I'll tell you what, we're going to give you 12 months to ease into it. So there's just all these factors out there that when it gets to it, we're going to see in the election coming up, do people vote their pocketbook? Historically, that's the case. You see some great macro data about the economy that we've been talking about this morning. But if you look at the household income data, it's not good at all. Prices are still high. Is inflation beginning to cool? Sure, but not at the 2% benchmark that the Fed likes. Everybody, you look at, my goodness, I did Christmas shopping this weekend, Pete. I about had a stroke buying stuff, just looking at the prices of clothing and everything is up. And that's where the American people are struggling with gas, groceries, household goods. And so we're in this weird time. And personal responsibility is the key to winning, no matter what the economy is. That's what we've been preaching at Ramsey Solutions. It doesn't matter who's in the White House. It matters who's running your house.
That's well said. Ken Coleman is joining us, of course, Ramsey personality. He hosts the Ken Coleman Show. You'll hear him as well here on KCMO as a co-host of the Ramsey Show. So, you mentioned some of the headlines. I see this from the Associated Press over the weekend, Ken. The Federal Reserve could do what we thought was impossible, defeat inflation without a steep recession. So I guess Jerome Powell's got the check in the mail to the AP, but it's like we're patting somebody on the back for totally screwing something up and then maybe getting us unscrewed, potentially. We don't even know yet, but they're already giving the guy a round of applause for this work, which I'm not quite sure if that's the case because he was late to the inflation party to begin with, was he not?
He absolutely was. And let's not forget, he has very little to do with this ability to not have a recession. They're giving him way too much credit. Let's remember, American businesses are doing very well. And those are leaders on Main Street, on Wall Street. Those are the folks who deserve the credit. The recession has everything to do with the economic output. And if you look at what companies have done over the last 2 years, they managed the greatest disruption to business in the history of the world, and that was the pandemic. So I applaud the American business leader. That's who deserves the applause, not Powell. He doesn't single-handedly keep us from going into a recession. That's nonsensical. It's ridiculous. So when you look at the robust economy that we have, it is about two things. It is about the economic output of the American business, what they're doing and how they're paying their people, and then you see consumer confidence has been pretty high. So you take those two things, none of those have anything to do with Jerome Powell.
That is a very good point. All right, so as we go into 2024, a lot of people are concerned, too, if there are interest rate cuts in the back half of the year, it will be perceived to be political. Should the Fed even consider potential political fallout or reaction to any rate cuts in 2024?
Well, I would say this no matter who's in office. I think the Fed has to do what they believe is best for monetary policy. And you hope they do the right thing because it's the right thing, that they don't do something to aid any party. So, I always hold my nose when I say things like that. I've never been a big Hamilton fan. You know that, Pete. So I'm not a fan of the Fed in general. And that was Alexander Hamilton for you history nuts out there. For those of you who have no idea about history and think it's a really great musical, there's more to it than that. But I digress. Here's what I would say. I think that they need to do what's good for policy. And what I'm interested in is, will we continue to see people pull out of the Treasury notes? And when we see that happen, then what we're going to see is the mortgage rates drop a little bit, and that could be really good for the economy. I think the soft landing has more to do with the housing economy than it does Jerome Powell. So we'll see what happens there.
Okay, interest. So the housing policy. Now, that being said, there's a lot of speculation about the future of housing policy. What do you think it is?
Well, I don't know what's going to happen there, but let me go back to that point so people understand. As the housing economy goes, so goes the American economy, and that's been the case for quite some time. So when you see a robust housing economy, usually you see an American economy. Excuse me. So what we're seeing right now is two factors. One, we have low inventory because people aren't wanting to sell their house. They're sitting on a 3.5% or lower interest rate, and they don't want to jump into the 7%. So they're sitting. Inventory's low. Well, interesting, Pete, that's kept prices pretty high. And then the second factor is the interest rate, just kind of ticking up. So it's got new home buyers out. So it's just kept demand really, really low. If we see interest rates drop, psychologically, people are going to go, well, it was in the 8s, 7s. If it gets down into the low 6s, even a high 5 over the next year, people are going to go, okay, I'm jumping in. And that should begin to help us in two areas. Refinances, which is really good for the mortgage industry, and people begin to move, and they're feeling good about their household income, saving money. That's always good. And then, more importantly, people buying and selling. And then housing starts. When you see construction starts, all of that really helps the economy with jobs and local economy. So that's what I'm keeping my eye on.
Gotcha. All right, last thing in the next minute here, Ken Coleman, Ramsey Personality. Your show, The Ken Coleman Show, I saw you just dropped the new episode this morning. Simple trick to blocking out the haters. I got a lot of haters, Ken. How do I block them out? What do I need to do, my man?
You just focus only on what you believe you're supposed to say on this show. You know what you believe. You know why you believe it. You know what you're doing. You know why you want to do it. And you stay focused on that. Where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now, folks? That's what we're focused on. We got our eye on the prize, head up, shoulders back, and we're not worried about what everybody else has to say because it's your life, not their life. Here's the thing. Sadly, Pete, we have so many people, too many people, most people spend their life doing what it takes to fit in. instead of doing what it takes to stand out, to be who they were uniquely made to be. And so that's how we block out the haters. We're too busy focused forward. We're not worried about what everybody else is saying beside me or behind me.
I love that. That's some inspiration on a Monday. Ken, you're the best. We appreciate the time, my friend. Thanks so much. And Merry Christmas. We'll talk to you in a couple weeks.
Merry Christmas. Talk to you soon, buddy.
All right. Ken Coleman does a great job with the Ken Coleman Show. Ramsey personality. You hear him from 3 to 5 here on KCMO 95.7 FM.